I brought in a housekeeper to tidy up while my whole family was away. About an hour later, she rang and whispered, "Ma'am, is anyone else in the house?" I went rigid. "No, what's wrong?" "There's a woman upstairs." I started shaking. "Get out now." I called 911 and raced home at top speed. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of vengeance from. I want to know how far it has traveled. That morning, I planned to tackle the cleaning myself. I wanted everything sparkling, especially before the coastal storms returned. When the humidity sets in and weighs everything down, I pushed up my sleeves, grabbed a rag, and took my place at the living room window, fired up to begin. As I wiped the glass, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I looked at the screen. It was Eva, my childhood friend, whom I hadn't heard from in ages. Her bright voice bubbled through, saying she'd be passing through Savannah, Georgia for a single day and hoped to meet for coffee. My heart warmed at her familiar voice. Eva and I shared a lifetime of memories, sprinting through fields, whispering past midnight, trading dreams. How could I say no? But staring at the mess I had to clean, I hesitated. I couldn't leave the house like this. Then I remembered Brianna Parker, the 20-something who lived down the alley near me. She was petite, soft-spoken, and always looking for extra hours to pay for college. I called her and she jumped at it, grateful for the chance. I gave her clear, step-by-step instructions: dust the study, scrub the staircase to the second floor, and above all, be careful with the old dusty shelves belonging to my husband, Jonathan. I left her a spare key and asked her to lock up tight when she finished. I drove to the Magnolia Tree Cafe where Eva was waiting. We sat under a sprawling live oak. She told me about her city life, about her children now grown. I told her about Jonathan, his work as a published novelist, and my tranquil, though sometimes empty days. We laughed, remembering old times. In the middle of our chat, my phone rang again. I saw the number. It was Brianna. I smiled, assuming she was calling to say she was finished. But when I answered, I didn't hear her usual shy voice. Instead, I heard quick, shallow breathing, as if she was trying to contain a panic. "Ms. Grace," she barely whispered, voice quivering so softly I could hardly hear. "Is there anyone else in the house?" My heart stalled. "No," I replied, trying to sound calm. "I'm having coffee. My husband is at the publisher's office and won't be back until tonight." "What's going on, Brianna?" There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. I could only hear her ragged breathing. Suddenly, her voice broke. "There's a woman on the second floor. I was cleaning the stairs and I saw her. She wore a long white dress with tangled hair. She walked down the hallway and disappeared into the last room." Her words were like an ice-cold knife in my chest. I tried to stay calm, but the hand holding the phone was trembling hard. My first thought was that someone had broken in. The house was over 70 years old, but we always kept it locked carefully. How could someone have entered? I apologized to Eva, saying I had an emergency. She looked worried, but I just shook my head, unable to explain more. I told Brianna on the phone, "Brianna, get out right now. Lock the door and wait outside." "I'm on my way." I phoned the police again while driving, my voice cracking with fear. I explained there was an intruder in the house, trying to provide details even though my mind was a whirlwind. I tried to call Brianna again, but she didn't answer. Every unanswered ring made my heart pound harder, as if it were trying to burst from my chest. I imagined the worst, that something had happened to her or that the intruder had attacked her. That day, the streets of Savannah seemed endless, even though I was pressing the pedal. When I arrived home, a police cruiser was already parked in front of the door. Brianna sat hunched on the front step, her face ashen, her eyes wide, haunted with terror. I rushed toward her, hugged her, and asked anxiously, "Are you okay? Did you see anything else?" Brianna just shook her head, her lips pressed together as if she couldn't utter a single word. Two police officers, one middle-aged with a serious look and a younger one, walked out of the house. They said they had checked every corner, every room, every closet, under the beds, even the backyard shed. There was no one. There were 0 signs of forced entry. All doors and windows were secured, without a single scratch or strange mark. I sighed with relief, but the feeling of uneasiness didn't leave me. Brianna recounted, still trembling. "Is where I saw her, Ms. Grace. She didn't look real. She was like a shadow. I won't dare go up to the second floor again." I rubbed her shoulder to comfort her, but a doubt took root inside me. This house was over 70 years old. It had belonged to Jonathan's family before we moved in. The brick walls, the creaking wooden doors, the dark corners, they had always made me feel like they were keeping secrets. But I couldn't imagine a woman. Just then, I heard Jonathan's sedan pull up the cobblestone driveway in front of the house. He got out, eyes narrowing at the police car and me next to Brianna. I took his arm and quickly told him what happened. I expected him to be as worried as I was, to want to find out what was going on, but Jonathan only gave a faint smile, a look I rarely saw. He approached Brianna, patted her shoulder, and said in a soft, almost mocking voice, "You must have been tired, honey, and confused the sun's reflection with a shadow. Our house is old. It has many corners that play tricks on the eyes." Brianna lowered her head without saying another word. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I knew she wasn't a fanciful girl. She was hard-working, honest. She had no reason to invent something like this. But Jonathan's gaze, his calm, began to make me second-guess myself. Maybe he was right. I apologized to the police for making them come out. A bitter flush of embarrassment rose in my chest. I paid Brianna, asked her to go rest, and promised I would call her if I needed her. 3 months later, I officially retired. There were no more rushed mornings getting ready for work, no endless meetings, no days racing against deadlines. The old house in Savannah became my world, but the change of pace kept me awake at night. Every night I stayed up staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick in the darkness. During those nights, I began to notice strange sounds coming from the attic. At first, they were slight noises, as if something small dropped to the floor. I convinced myself it was the wind whistling through the old windows or the wood shifting with the changing weather. But little by little, the sounds became clearer, more vivid. I heard something like a chair scraping across the floor, slow and heavy. Then light but constant footsteps, as if someone were walking back and forth. Sometimes I even heard the papery rustle of pages, as though someone was silently turning the leaves of a book. I told Jonathan one morning as we sat over breakfast in the kitchen. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy. "Honey, I've been hearing noises in the attic lately. It's not the wind. Sounds like someone's up there." Jonathan yawned, never lifting his eyes from the newspaper. He murmured, "It's just rats, Grace. The attic's old, crammed with junk, rodent heaven. I'll grab traps tomorrow, set them, and that's it." Next day, right on cue, Jonathan came home with heavy metal traps, the kind that snap loud when they spring shut. He set them at the bottom of the ladder to the attic, right under the old wooden door. "There," he said, brushing off his hands. "Now you can sleep easy, sweetheart." Oddly enough, the noises vanished after that. No more footsteps, no chair scrapes, no paper rustle. I exhaled, half convinced Jonathan was right. Maybe it really was mice and I'd worked myself up. Then the strange things began, the kind you can't shrug off. One afternoon, I picked up a package of spicy sausage at the local market, my favorite for its punch. Jonathan, on the other hand, can't stand heat. He wouldn't even touch it. I wrapped it carefully and tucked it into the fridge, planning to enjoy it over the weekend. Next morning, I opened the fridge and froze. A big chunk was gone. The cut was jagged, like someone had hacked it off in a hurry. I asked Jonathan, who was reading in the living room, "Did you take some sausage from the fridge?" He looked up, brows knitting as if the question were ridiculous. I felt like trying something spicy yesterday, so I sliced a little," he said absently. "Pretty good, actually." I stood there, speechless. Jonathan has never tolerated spicy food. He complains if I add too much seasoning. But I didn't want to argue. I just nodded and walked away, a cold doubt settling in my chest. A few days later, the sausage was completely gone. I dug through the fridge, checked the trash can, found nothing. This time, I didn't ask Jonathan anything. The unease inside me hardened like ice. Then, one Saturday, Jonathan and I drove to Charleston, South Carolina, to visit old friends. We left early and got back late. When we walked in, the house was quiet as ever. I went to the upstairs bathroom to wash my face and shake off the day. The moment I stepped inside, I felt cold, slick water underfoot. The floor was soaked. Icy water slid between my sandals. It looked like someone had just showered. Drops still tracked down the tile, glinting under the light. My heart thundered. No one had been home. How could that be? I called Jonathan, my voice trembling. "Come here, please." The bathroom's soaked like someone just bathed. He came in, glanced around, shrugged. "Must have been an afternoon rain blowing in through the ceiling vent, babe." I looked out the window. The street out front was bone dry under the streetlights. "It hasn't rained, Jonathan," I said, trying to stay calm. He scowled, mildly irritated. "Then it's probably an old pipe leak. You worry about everything. I'll call a plumber tomorrow." But he never called. In the days that followed, the bathroom floor stayed dry. I checked the vent and the pipes. Everything looked normal. Jonathan's explanation, plausible on paper, didn't erase my growing dread. The attic sounds, the missing sausage, the water with no source, pieces that didn't fit. Together they formed a picture I couldn't stop turning over in my mind. A week later, I decided to clean Jonathan's study. It was his sanctuary, a small room on the second floor, dusty oak shelves packed with hundreds of books and old documents. I'd often thought we should donate the unused ones to the city library so they could reach people who needed them. That day, I stood in the middle of the room sorting the books on Jonathan's desk. Drafts, notes, papers, piled high, chaotic, as if he'd given up on ever organizing them. When I lifted a heavy stack, my hand wobbled and the papers splashed onto the floor. The crisp flutter punctured the quiet and made me jump. I bent to gather them, and just then a small wooden drawer, stuck for years, snapped open with a dry click. I hesitated, then looked inside. Beneath a sheaf of yellowed drafts sat a small hardback notebook, dark brown leather, corners worn thin. It looked old, not his style. Jonathan loves sleek, modern things. Laptops, pens, pristine white paper. That notebook, with its scuffed leather and loose cord, felt from another era. With a mix of nerves and curiosity, I took it in my trembling hands and opened to the first page. Inside were leaf after leaf of handwriting, soft, elegant, clearly a woman's. I flipped through, skimming. Story outlines, character notes, plot ideas. One fragment described a mountainside town where a woman lived alone, waiting forever. Another hinted at a buried secret, details that raised goosebumps. Different as they were, the ideas felt eerily close to Jonathan's best-known novels, the ones that made his name. My heart pounded, my throat drying. It couldn't be coincidence. I know Jonathan too well. He hates writing by hand, calls it slow and messy. Everything, novel drafts, work notes, even grocery lists, he does on the computer. I remember asking him once to jot down a restaurant address. Instead of grabbing the pen beside him, he booted up the computer to type it. So whose notebook was this? A secret collaborator? An admirer's gift? I sat, the notebook heavy in my hands. Part of me wanted to show Jonathan the moment he walked in. I wanted his explanation, but I hesitated. I know him. Jonathan can make anything sound reasonable. He'd smile, say it was a reader's gift or some old attempt from a phase when he tried handwriting. And I, like so many times before, would nod and let it slide into silence. Not this time. I didn't want to let it go. Carefully, I put the notebook back, pushed the drawer all the way to the rear, as if hiding it would keep it from vanishing. That night, I lay awake again, watching the ceiling, listening to the clock tick in the dark. Around 2 a.m., a thin creak came from the hallway. Small, yes, but in the stillness it sounded like a whisper. I jerked upright, heart racing. I don't know why, but I thought immediately of the little door to the attic, the one Jonathan and I almost never opened. I got up slowly, without switching on the light, afraid the brightness would shatter whatever truth I was about to face. Moonlight bled through the window, just enough to show a sliver, the attic door ajar. A cold, damp draft spooled down, carrying the smell of old paper and stale air. I stood frozen, feet rooted. Fear and curiosity wrestled, locking me in place. I went back to the bedroom and nudged my husband's shoulder. "Jonathan, wake up." "The attic door's open," Jonathan groaned, half asleep, and got up with an irritated huff. He slid on his slippers and walked ahead of me down the hallway without a word. When we reached it, the door was shut, the latch set, like no one had touched it. I stared, scanning for any sign. A scratch, a crack, nothing. Jonathan turned to me with an expression of weariness and letdown. "Grace," he said in a low, drained tone, "you've been wound too tight lately. You're not sleeping. That's why you're seeing things that aren't there. Come back to bed." He guided me back. I lay down but kept staring, eyes wide, at the ceiling. For the first time, I started to doubt myself, wondering if I had imagined everything. In the days that followed, after finding the mysterious notebook, I tried to act normal. Even as the unease ate at me, I started watching Jonathan's every gesture, every look, every word. Lately, he'd picked up a new habit that only deepened my suspicions. Around 10 p.m., when I was already in bed with a book, ready to sleep, he'd say he needed to keep working in the study. "I need to focus a bit, Grace," he would say in a gentle but firm voice. "The manuscript's at a tough spot. You go ahead and sleep." I'd nod, forcing a smile. But every time the study door clicked shut, I felt an invisible gap widening between us. One night, I woke up thirsty. The nightstand clock showed almost 1 a.m., the second hand ticking out the darkness. I reached for Jonathan, but the bed was empty, the sheets cool, as if he'd never been there. My heart jumped. A flutter of dread ran through me. Where was he? I put on a thin robe and stepped into the hallway, thinking he might have nodded off at his desk, like he did sometimes when the publisher's pressure wore him down. I walked the dark hallway. The faint living room light threw strange shadows on the walls. I eased the study door open, but the room was empty. The screen was black, the chair neatly tucked under the desk, like no one had been there. I called softly, "Jonathan?" My voice echoed, but no answer. I went to the kitchen, thinking he might be getting water, but it was empty too. Only moonlight slipped through the window, turning the plates on the shelves into ghost shapes. I wandered the house, calling his name, my voice shakier each time. My heart hammered, as if bracing for what I was about to face. As I passed the staircase to the second floor, I heard a feather-light step, almost imperceptible if I hadn't been listening. I looked up, and in the dim hallway light I saw a silhouette slowly coming down. It was Jonathan. He was barefoot, walking carefully, as if he didn't want to make the slightest sound. In his hand he carried a porcelain plate, the kind we used for weekend dinners. When he saw me, his eyes flashed wide. Surprise crossed his face. The plate slipped, hit the stone floor with a sharp clank, and shattered. The sound ripped the quiet and made me step back. I stared at the fragments, confused. The plate was empty, clean, no trace of food or grease, as if it had been freshly washed. That only deepened my confusion. I looked up at Jonathan and asked, voice trembling, "What were you doing up there at this hour? I thought you were in the study." He bent down and began gathering pieces with slow, careful movements, like he was buying time to think. He avoided my eyes and said in a strained tone, "I got stuck on the ending. The editor keeps pushing, you know. I needed a quiet spot, so I went upstairs for a while. I got hungry and took some food up." I watched him pick up the shards, not quite believing him. I knelt to help. When our fingers brushed on the cold floor, a shiver of distance ran through me. The hand that once comforted me now chilled my skin. I knew the publisher's pressure was real. The constant calls from Mr. Sterling kept him tense. Maybe, I told myself, he just needed space to write. Maybe I was overreacting. The next morning, the house felt heavy, like an invisible cloud hung above us. I woke tired, my head crowded with unanswered doubts. Jonathan, avoiding my eyes, got up earlier than usual. I heard him making coffee, porcelain clinking softly, without the usual good morning. He locked himself in the study, door closing hard, and I knew he wanted no interruptions. I stayed in the hallway, looking at that wooden door with a heavy heart. Near noon, Jonathan came out wearing a gray suit and carrying a small suitcase. He paused in the living room, where I sat with a cup of cooling tea. "I need to go away for a few days," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "Maybe Atlanta. I need a change of scenery for inspiration." I looked up, surprised. Jonathan never left without warning. He always planned ahead, always looped me in on the itinerary. "Why so suddenly?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though my heart was pounding. He didn't meet my eyes. He stared at the window, where sunlight filtered through dusty panes. "The idea just came to me," he replied, even-toned. "Be careful while I'm gone." Then, just before stepping out, he turned and set his hands on my shoulders. His grip was stronger than usual. I flinched. "Grace," he said in a quiet, serious tone, "while I'm away, don't let anyone in. Do you hear me? Especially no one from the publishing house. If Mr. Sterling comes by, tell him I left and you don't know when I'll be back." I nodded, but the unease swelled in me. It didn't sound like a simple warning, it sounded like an order. Jonathan had been gone about 2 hours when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. Sterling, Jonathan's editor, with a young assistant. Both looked impatient. I hesitated, hand on the knob, chest fluttering. Jonathan's words echoed in my head, but I couldn't ignore the door. I took a breath, opened it, and forced a smile. Mr. Sterling didn't wait for an invitation. He strode into the living room, annoyed. She paused, breathing shakily. To keep from losing my mind, I started writing. Stories I dreamed, worlds where I could be free, where I wasn't a shadow. I listened, each word a knife point. I pictured Lena, once vibrant, hunched in that cold attic, clinging to a pencil like a last spark of hope. "One day," she said, "Jonathan found my pages. I thought he'd tell me to keep them for myself. But no." His eyes lit up like he'd found treasure. He said, "Lena, you have talent. Write for me. I'll be your voice to the world." I was stunned. I remembered when Jonathan suddenly announced he was quitting his newspaper accounting job to chase writing. Friends and family were shocked. He'd never shown interest in literature. I felt proud thinking he'd found a spark I never imagined. But the truth hit like a slap. Jonathan wasn't a writer. He was a thief, stealing Lena's talent, turning her into a ghostwriter. A ghost in the most literal sense, locked inside my own home. Lena went on, her voice trembling and sharp with bitterness. So many times I wanted to stop, to turn myself in. The guilt was unbearable, the feeling that the life being lived wasn't mine. Every time I said it, Jonathan threatened me. He said if I confessed, you'd suffer most. He swore you couldn't handle learning your sister had killed a man and your husband helped hide it, that you'd lose everything, family, reputation, everything you love. I bit my lip. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Lena's words tore at my heart. Jonathan had used my love, and Lena's love for me, to keep her in the dark. I covered my face, trying to hold back the sobs. "Forgive me, Lena," I whispered, voice broken. "I didn't know. I never imagined." But Lena shook her head. She took my hands. Her thin fingers tightened, as if trying to pull me out of the pain. "Don't apologize, sister," she said. "I let him manipulate me too. I was afraid. I believed doing what he said was the only way to protect you." She explained that living in secret had grown harder, especially after I retired and spent more time at home. Before I left early, came back late, and crashed after dinner. I never noticed. "That's why I had to shower fast when you both were out," she said, looking down. "Why I stole food from the fridge at night. I tried not to leave traces, but sometimes I was clumsy. The bathroom puddle, the piece of sausage you bought. Suddenly, I remembered every odd detail, the signs I'd chosen to ignore. Now everything made sense, a truth almost too painful to accept. I thought of Jonathan's novels I'd read and admired. I had always wondered why the setting felt so old, so nostalgic, like time had stalled decades ago. The characters wrote letters, waited in vain, and no one used cell phones. Now I understood. It wasn't style. It was Lena's stopped world. She was trapped in the past and could only write what she knew. Those stories of people who never found each other were reflections of her own tragedy. Life cut off from the world. Lena took my hands, eyes filling. "Sister Grace," she said, her voice trembling but firm, "I can't live like this anymore. I've paid for my mistake for 30 years in this prison. Now I want real justice. I want to turn myself in." Her words were a final blade, severing the last threads of hope I'd held. I had lost her once, believing she'd run away. I didn't want to lose her again. But looking into her eyes, I knew what she needed. Freedom through truth, however painful. Tears streamed, but I nodded, gripping her hand. "Okay, Lena," I said, my voice catching. "I'll take you to the police station. We'll face it together." I hugged her, feeling how fragile she was. My heart ached, but a small spark lit inside me, the hope that, even late, I could help her reclaim her freedom. The next morning, I dressed Lena in one of my clean outfits. The dress hung on her thin frame, but at least she looked more presentable. We hadn't slept. I sat beside her in the living room, telling her how the world had changed, the tall buildings, the smartphones glued to everyone's hands, the loved ones who were gone. Lena listened in silence, her gaze distant, trying to picture a world stolen from her. I drove to the downtown police department with Lena beside me. She was hunched in the passenger seat, hands clasped, eyes on the window like a stranger seeing a new planet. "Everything's changed too much," she whispered, amazed by electric cars and kids snapping photos on their phones. I took her hand and squeezed, trying to lend courage. "I'm here, Lena," I said, voice trembling. "We'll get through this together." At the station, I asked to speak with the head of detectives. At first they refused, appointments only. But when I mentioned the disappearance of Lena Whitlock 30 years ago, everything changed. An officer led us to an interrogation room, gray walls, an icy metal table. With my help, Lena started to tell her story. Her voice was clear and calm, as if she'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in her head. She spoke of that night, of Darren, of the accidental blow that took his life, and of how Jonathan hid her in the attic, turning her into a ghost for 3 decades. The police listened, stunned. One officer scribbled non-stop while another spoke urgently into the radio. Lena's confession shook the entire department. The case files were reopened immediately. An investigative team headed to my house to search the attic and document evidence of Lena's hidden life: the manuscripts, food tins, the soiled blanket. Another group, following Lena's exact directions, set off for the low-country woods near the Ogeechee River. Within hours, they found human remains buried beneath an old tree deep in the timber. Preliminary DNA analysis confirmed they were the remains of Darren Cole, the man everyone believed had run off with her. The arrest warrant for Jonathan was issued that day. Police staged an ambush at our house, waiting for his return from Atlanta. I wasn't there, but later Mr. Hamilton, our neighbor, told me Jonathan offered no resistance when they handcuffed him at the gate. He just bowed his head, his face blank, as if he'd always known this day would come. Hearing it, I felt a hollow emptiness. The man I once loved, whom I trusted without question, was now only a distant shadow, weighted with the secret that wrecked my entire family. I hired the best defense attorney for Lena, someone determined to fight for clemency. With the arguments of self-defense and the 30 years she spent imprisoned in secret, manipulated by Jonathan, he believed justice would see her as a victim, not a perpetrator. I spent the whole day gathering things to take to her: clean clothes, books, and the dishes she'd loved as a child. I wanted her to know that no matter what, I would always be there. But a few days later, while I was packing to visit, the phone rang. A cool, official voice came from the other end. "Ms. Whitlock, we regret to inform you, Lena Whitlock took her own life at the detention center last night." The phone slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a hard thud. My world broke again. Lena, my sister, the one I had just gotten back, had chosen to leave, leaving me alone in a pain beyond words. She had told the truth, faced her past, but maybe she couldn't bear another trial or the stares of a world that doesn't forgive. The officer said Lena had left a letter for me. That afternoon, they handed it over. I held it with shaking hands, looking at her soft, familiar handwriting. The same I'd seen in the attic notebook, but now uneven, wavering, as if it took her last ounce of strength to write it. I opened the letter and tears came before I read the first line. "Dear Sister Grace," she wrote. "When you read this, I will be free. For 30 years, I wrote to survive, to keep from disappearing, but never under my own name. I lived as a ghost, and it's time for that ghost to fade. I don't regret telling the truth. It was the only right thing. Don't be sad. Think of it as the end of my story. The final manuscript is still in the attic, inside a wooden box under the table. It's the only work I wrote about myself. If you can, please let it carry the name of Lucia Whitlock." I folded the letter, hugged it to my chest, and drenched it with tears. Lucia Whitlock, the name Lena wanted to use if she ever became a writer, the name that was stolen from her. I knew I had to honor her last wish. I would find that manuscript and bring it into the light so the world would know Lena's story, not as a ghost, but as a woman, a writer, a soul who fought to be free. The trial against Jonathan came a few months later, turning into a national scandal. The press called it the Ghostwriter of Savannah case. Newspapers filled their front pages with Lena's life. A young woman shut away, stripped of freedom, used to build the fame of a man who never deserved it. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Darren's remains in the low country woods, the attic manuscripts, and Lena's testimony before her death, Jonathan lowered his head and confessed. He was charged with multiple felonies: copyright theft, unlawful imprisonment, conspiracy to cover up a crime, and obstruction of justice. The sentence was a fitting end, but I felt no relief. For me, Jonathan had ended the day I discovered the truth, the day the man I loved became a stranger. I didn't attend the trial. I couldn't face him. I couldn't look into the eyes that once spoke love yet hid such horror. Instead, I returned to the house, once a home, now a storehouse of painful memories. One afternoon, as sunlight thinned over the cobblestone street, I decided to go back to the attic. This time I felt no fear, no weight. I climbed each rung with a flashlight in hand, my heart lighter, as if I were seeking the part of Lena she'd left behind. I found the wooden box under the table, just as she'd written. It was small, old, carefully kept, as if it held her last treasure. Inside lay a stack of meticulously handwritten pages on yellowed paper. Lena's soft, flowing script was clear, as if she were there, speaking to me. I carried the box downstairs, sat beneath the desk lamp, and began to read. It was a life in pages, an autobiography shaped like a novel. She wrote about our childhood, running the Savannah fields, her dream of being a writer she once confessed to me, the terrible night that stole her future, the 30 years spent in darkness, and the incredible strength it took not to let her soul break. Every page was a cut, but also a song of resilience, of love for life, despite the hardness of it. I spent weeks editing the manuscript, reviewing every line as if touching Lena's soul. Some nights I stayed up until dawn, tears running as I read the passages where she spoke of her loneliness in the attic, or the moments she imagined stepping into sunlight. The book was not just her story, it was the voice of a forgotten person stripped of identity. I knew I had to share it so Lena wouldn't be just a name in my memory, but a true writer. I contacted Jonathan's former publishing house. At first they hesitated, wary of the scandal, but when I sent Lena's manuscript, they were convinced. "This is a masterpiece," the editor told me, voice full of emotion. "We will publish it, with the respect Lena deserves." The book was released under her true name, Lena Whitlock. On the first page, instead of a prologue, I wrote a single line. No one should be kept in the dark, least of all someone who loves freedom. It was my message to her. To my dear sister I loved in this world, the book became a phenomenon. Readers across America, and then around the world, were moved by Lena's life. They admired her talent, her honesty, the quiet poetry in every line. Jonathan's old works, now reissued under Lena's name, began to sell again, a way to rewrite the injustice. Though she was gone, Lena finally became a recognized and beloved writer. I read the reviews and letters from readers, and my heart felt tight yet warm. You did it, Lena, I thought. You got your voice back. Sometimes I still climb to the attic. It's no longer a cell. We've cleaned it and turned it into a small library. I open the window and let the sunlight stream in, washing the shelves where Lena's works sit with respect. I stand there looking out at the lively street. Lena's voice has been recovered, and justice, in its way, has been served. I know she is somewhere in the light, in those pages, and in my heart. Free forever. And when it all ended, I understood something. No wall is thick enough to lock away truth forever. Lies, no matter how carefully hidden, rot with time, like dust on old shelves. Lena's life proves that silence can be crueler than guilt, and fear can turn a person into a ghost inside their own existence. If there's one lesson I want to leave you with, it's this. Face the truth even when it hurts. Speak even if your voice shakes. Only when we step out of darkness are we truly free. And only when truth is spoken can imprisoned souls finally rest. This story has changed names and locations to protect identities. We share it not to judge, but in the hope someone listens and thinks. How many mothers are suffering in silence at home? If you were in my place, what would you do? Keep quiet to preserve peace or face everything to reclaim your voice? I want your thoughts. Every story can be a candle lighting the way for others. God bless you, and may courage lead us to better days. For now, on the final screen, I'll leave 2 of the channel's most loved stories. I'm sure they'll surprise you. Did you enjoy this story, and what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you'd like to support the channel, you can send a super thanks so I can keep bringing you more stories. Thank you for your kindness. I'm looking forward to your comments. On screen, you'll see 2 new life stories I highly recommend, and there's much more on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.